A lot of times I've learned a lot about these estate situations after the fact. These were people who became clients after these situations have occurred, and that's what's pushed them into our office to learn about this. The first one, his name is Steve. Sorry if there's any Steves out there. Hope we're not describing you.
Yeah. It's not you, Steve. It's the other guy.
It's the other one. Yeah. So if one passes away and that those assets go just to the children, half of that income could go away for the surviving spouse. That could change their living situation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Legacy Life podcast. Today, we are talking about estate planning for the next couple weeks. We're going to go over some specific topics that we get a lot of questions about and kind of go from there. But as we go through this topic, if you guys have questions or specific things that you want us to hit on that we don't today, leave a comment, something like that, so that we can take it in and fit it into the show. But just to kind of get started here, I know we've kind of gone over it in previous episodes, but we're really going to hit on it the next few weeks here. But just to start out, what is estate planning for those who don't know?
Yeah, I think, for most people, it's, they say, well, it's how I transfer my wealth, my assets, everything that's mine to my next generation or to my favorite charities. It's how I disperse and pass on the things that I have, collected over my lifetime, and
hopefully in an efficient way.
And hopefully in an efficient way, and in a way that least amount of cost, and all those things. And all those things are true. And that's typically kind of some sort of that answer that we usually get. But in reality, too, when you get down to brass tacks, it really is taking, doing what I want, when I want, and how I want with the things I have. The next generation with the lowest amount of fees as possible. That's really what people are looking for at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to estate planning, I know it's like it's your estate, but there are a lot of different mechanisms involved. There's people involved, all sorts of different things like that. And I think navigating personnel and what's the best way to distribute things to different types of people and things like that can be a difficult task. And so I know you've done a lot of estate planning with people and have a lot of insights on it. So I guess kind of to start out, kind of give us your vision for what you kind of want to cover today. And
yeah, I think, this is such a nuanced process. There's no one size fits all. And I think that's really important because there's a lot of advertising out there, that DIY estate planning. There's like a lot of boilerplate type documents where you just kind of fill in the blank and kind of move on. And for some people that may work okay, depending on what they have going on. But for the majority of people that we speak with, there's never really just a one size fits all. So it's really important to have, some people have an insurance guy and maybe an investment planner and maybe an attorney and a CPA. But if none of them are talking together, the estate planning process becomes really hard. Everyone kind of needs to be in the same room because the estate plan is kind of the glue that puts all the rest of that together, And so with all the nuance into it, I thought maybe today we would just kind of focus on one specific aspect and talk about, the three people that can maybe wreck or derail your estate plans. Kind of have a little fun with it, but at the same time, trying to be honest and like, some of these examples we're going to give today come from real places and real conversations we have, and trying to create the proverbial, caricatures of some of the situations we've come in contact with.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it. So,
okay,
the three people that could ruin your estate plan.
Yeah. So we'll call the first one. His name is Steve. Sorry if there's any Steves out there. Hope we're not describing you.
Yeah. It's not you, Steve. It's the other guy.
It's the other one. Yeah. But this guy, he's got great hair. So, he's got one thing going for him.
Right.
But we're going to call him your daughter's future ex-spouse.
Okay.
Okay.
And,
like I said, he's got gray hair, but let me just kind of read. So he's had no job since COVID. Okay. You suspect maybe he's fond of maybe some chemical substances, might have a substance abuse problem, but he thinks it's great that he has rich in-laws. Okay. And maybe he's even part of a religious cult that you're kind of scared of,
Okay.
who knows?
So
Okay.
there's just a lot of red
A
flags
lot of red
there.
flags here. But if you pass on your inheritance to your daughter, are you really prepared for Steve to inherit half of that? Right. And my hunch, I could be wrong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but 100% of people watching this today who might find themselves maybe in a similar situation would say no. That the money we want to hand to our daughter, no, we would not want Steve to get half of that. Okay. But, so here's the situation. So let's say that family A has a couple $100,000 that they're going to hand off to their daughter. Okay. Now, if we were in a room, I'd ask for a show of hands. How many people have heard that if, that's the situation, you have a couple $100,000 you want to put into a bank account for daughter A, that if she doesn't add any money to it, she keeps it, in a separate bank account, doesn't commingle it with marital assets, that should not be included in a divorce. How many people would, by a show of hands, say that's the way it works? Okay. If people raise their hands, I would tell them that's exactly how it works. That's exactly right. That should not be included in the divorce. But Steve here, he Googled it and he was looking around here, and what he did is for the last year, he's been making deposits into that account without her knowing. Okay. And so when they file for a divorce a year later, he brings up, hey, this account should be included in the divorce. I've been making deposits into this account for a year now, and that might actually make it an issue in that divorce. And in a situation that I know of from another colleague, what ended up happening in that divorce is that 25% of that money ended up going to Steve, in that divorce. Now it was not 50%, right? Not 50-50, but still that's a situation where it should have been zero.
Right.
So what's the solution? How do you fix that? Right. So, in situations where there's families watching this saying, we might want to protect that money to our daughter, to our son, if it's the other way around. You can set up a trust for the daughter in this case, where the inherited money would go into an entity that would be on her behalf, where the entity, the trust, is actually kind of separate. There's some distance between the daughter and that trust, though she has control. But the money then could be transferred to that trust. And if the divorce ever ensued, that trust would never be included in the divorce proceedings, and 100% of that money would be protected for the daughter.
Right.
So it would never in any way be commingled with those marital assets.
Yeah.
So in situations like that, that's one fix and how you take care of that.
Right. And it seems like Steve probably seems a little out there. It's like, oh, that's just a crazy situation, but I'm sure it happens far more than people would like to admit.
Yeah. So the three people we're talking about today are not real people, but they're kind of real people.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but with the situations I have seen, a lot of times I've learned a lot about these estate situations after the fact. These were people who became clients after these situations have occurred. And that's what's pushed them into our office to learn about this, is because this happened, so I don't want this to happen again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping today someone can hear this that might be in this situation and maybe be a little more proactive and take care of things on the front end. Because people do get weird sometimes when people pass away and there's assets. It happens. So yes, trying to have a little humor and a little fun with this, but there's a lot of reality to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so a trust is a good way to protect in that way. What's another example?
Okay, so person number 2.
Okay,
so James.
Okay, James.
Got to come up with new ones.
Quote unquote.
So James, I guess in a way we kind of call him the prodigal son in some ways, just because in this situation, let's say, James, he started 3 businesses, okay, real estate deals, and they all failed. But if you were the parent, you were asked to help underwrite a lot of these financial deals, and you financially backed them. You were asked to bail them out when they didn't go well, and James recently filed bankruptcy. Okay, so are you ready to hand James, half of your assets or your assets when you pass away?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not.
Right.
You don't feel like James is in a place where he could do that. Now, you also may suspect maybe James has a chemical dependency problem. Okay, and can tell you a situation where you love him, right? But to be honest, giving James a lump sum inheritance probably is not in James' best interest because of the chemical dependency, the bad business decisions, right? And sometimes the best planning you can do is to protect. You want to protect your assets, but sometimes you're doing it to protect the people you love from themselves.
Right.
Okay. So, yes, real life situations where this comes from. What can you do in that situation to plan? So, here's one situation. So we'll just still call him James. The father was aware of the chemical dependency problem.
Right.
Okay. So what the father did in the estate plan is he put a provision in it that the assets were going to be put and invested in a certain way to give out income, and he was going to pay James income quarterly. But in order for James to get that income quarterly, what do you think James had to do in this situation?
My guess is to not have his substance abuse problem.
Right. So in there was a provision where James had to go take a drug test.
Right.
Okay. Pass the drug test, you get the check. Okay. And that was all written in the trust as a stipulation and to be carried out. So he did that. And James passed the drug test. Why? Because he needed the check.
Right.
Okay. He needed the money. And so this story actually here does have a happy ending.
Okay.
So he puts that in there. So 1 quarter turned into 2 quarters, turned into 5, turned into 8. 18 months later, guess what? James no longer had a chemical dependency problem.
Mm-hmm.
And he got his life together. 2 years after that, he actually was able to start a business. And he was still drug-free, and that income was still consistently there. And there was a provision that if he got through the chemical dependency problem, then the trustee had permission to free up more capital to give to James out of the trust. And that's what he used to help fund that business, got remarried, started a family, and has been thriving ever since. So that's a story with a happy ending,
right?
And with some great planning in mind, that it wasn't like the father's like, I'm keeping everything from you. It's like, but if you do want it, here's some things you have to do to help better yourself in order to qualify to get it. And so you can put any other kind of qualifiers around it. They don't necessarily have to have a chemical dependency problem, but you can still protect them. If you don't feel they're ready to inherit a whole bunch of money for whatever reason, there's things you can do. And so I love that story.
Yeah.
That's a great story, a turnaround, and a great planning technique to help take care of, alleviate that.
Yeah. And to kind of push his son to grow as well. He kind of use it. Yeah.
Right. Can you imagine what would have happened if that provision wasn't in the trust?
Right.
What would have happened to James' life then? Right.
Yeah. If he got all the money just right off the bat.
Without any accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a cool story. I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Is the third one just as happy?
This one, I can just imagine, you talk about this one live, you're going to want maybe like some shield, some protection here.
Oh, okay.
Got to tell the ladies, don't get mad over this one.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a real situation. So person number 3 we'll call Elaine.
Mm-hmm.
And Elaine is the husband's next spouse.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say, ladies, don't get mad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because it's because the wife has passed away. It's not because he's cheating.
Yeah, I was curious where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
But in the months since the wife has passed, Elaine is bringing over home cooked meals. She dresses really nice. She hates the wallpaper in the house that was there. And she feels like the money that was going to be spent on the kids has a better purpose if they're spent on things like vacations and jewelry and other things.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is where, maybe a lot of times, maybe if you're in an audience, women might want to start throwing things at me. But the truth is, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just let's take a look at this, because the fact of the matter is that people do get remarried after their spouse passes away. This does happen.
Right.
And because I could have easily just made the story about Bob,
Right.
as opposed to Elaine, right?
Right. Other way around.
Exactly.
Whatever, yeah.
And we have, in our book and in my friends in their book of business, there's several widows and widowers in the book of business, and a lot of them have remarried.
Yeah.
And hey, love is a great thing, and sometimes getting remarried can be a compliment to the spouse that is deceased, because the surviving spouse many times enjoyed companionship so much that they didn't want to be without it. That could be a real compliment to the person that's passed away. And so, we think it's great, but, the problem is that a lot of times couples don't have these conversations. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go home tonight, crack open a bottle of wine and say, hey, honey, I was thinking about talking about tonight who my next person is going to be after you.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not talking about that, or you're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. But these conversations should happen. Maybe not in that context, but they should take place. And, if you have kids that money is supposed to go to, if that's what the intention was in the original plan before the original spouse passes away, you need to make sure you put a provision in your plan so that it does take care of everybody.
Right.
Okay. So how do you fix that? Right? How do you fix if there's a remarriage? So there's something there called an A-B trust, where you can have trust A, and then it's what we call a bypass trust, so that if the spouse passes away, their half of the assets go into a B trust that's earmarked for the children. And then the income from that trust can continue to go to the surviving spouse while they're still alive. But when they pass, those remaining assets then go to the children. So, the person who's passing away can have their part go into a bypass, and it protects it from, if the husband or wife do get remarried, that stays out of the new marriage assets.
Gotcha.
Okay. But there's another aspect to this. Do you have a question before I go on to the other aspect?
No, nope.
Okay. So the other aspect is what if you're already in a second marriage and we didn't do that?
Right.
What now? Okay. You have 2 kids. She has 2 kids. What do we do now? So there's no kids together. Okay. They're just from the previous marriages. And you're trying to figure out how it's going to work. So, we had a situation like this, not me personally, but another colleague of mine had a situation, and, they decided that if anything happened to either one of them, that their portion would go to the kids. Yeah. Okay. But here was the problem. He had a pension. She had a 401k, and they were taking income from it. And that income was supporting both of them. Right. So if one passes away and that those assets go just to the children, half of that income could go away for the surviving spouse. That could change their living situation. So what they did is they set up a trust where their half of the assets would go for the children earmarked, but the income could still continue for the surviving spouse. And then when that spouse either, when they passed away, it was retained, the ownership with the children. They would get the principal of the assets. Yeah. That was there. And so the death of the second spouse, the children would just get the assets. So in both situations, we are able to, you could still take care of the children and still take care of the spouses, but not have a situation where it all just would go to the spouse and the children get nothing.
Yeah.
That's what's the important part.
Right.
To make sure
yeah.
the children are protected. Yeah. There's a way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So moral of the story, regardless of the situation or what's going on, there probably is some sort of provision or trust you can put together with estate attorneys that can kind of hedge against the situation and
Yeah,
to protect whatever it is that your real hopes and desires are for your estate when you do pass away.
correct.
And it just takes being willing to like look at the reality of the situation and say like, all right, the X, Y, and Z could actually happen. How can we defend against those things?
Exactly. Be intentional about your planning. Be willing to have the hard conversations and talk about these things. These are real things that do happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hard to talk about sometimes. I mean, I don't want to think about, my children, grandchildren having chemical dependency problems.
Right.
My spouse being with another person. I understand, but let's talk about these realities and see how you can best plan for it in the most efficient and best way. And to keep it out of court and litigation.
Right.
Protect people's relationships, feelings, those kind of things. It's really important to be open and honest about it. The more you can do that, the better things are going to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you think when you hear estate planning, you don't necessarily think about the relational side of things, but it is a huge part of the estate planning process.
It's more than just a stack of documents.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Although it is a stack of documents.
It is a stack of documents, but it's not just that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There are real people involved.
Yep. And real futures involved.
Yep. And so, I think that's good for this episode, that it kind of covers one aspect of estate planning. If that really spoke to you, or you kind of jogged your thinking about maybe some of your situations that don't necessarily fit, Steve, James, and Elaine specifically, but some of the nuances there that you need to talk about, click the link in the show notes to get our calendar. Be more than happy to have a free consultation with you and to go through your estate plan. And if you haven't subscribed to our show, please hit the subscribe button and to get alerted to every time we have a new episode that comes out once a week, so you can stay in touch with what we're talking about here. Please leave a comment, any questions you have. If you have any great stories about legacy from your family, or some of the great planning that people in your life have done that have meant something to you and that you'd be willing to share about, let us know, because we'd love to hear about it. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.